Greetings from the cosmic horrors. The stars are right once again, and the great old ones are allowed us to talk about for 30 minutes H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer who's a genre unto himself. I am your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executor of the Lovecraft estate on Yawgoth, joined in by two from the material world, David Guffey, a professor at Miskatonic University, and Richard Wilson, who has currently been ostracized by the Lovecraft community when he attempted to pawn the Silver Key. We will continue exploring Lovecraft's fascination with 1001 Nights, aka Arabian Nights. As you may remember, Lovecraft as a child named himself Abu Hazared, we reenacting the world of his cherished book. Abu Hazared and his Necronomicon are a constant presence in Lovecraft's writings. It's harder to think of a story where they appear than where they don't. From Dreams in the Witch House to At the Mountains of Madness, at least some passing reference has been made to the Muslim elucidator of Lovecraft's universe. According to Ian Ahman, a professor of world literature at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in Qatar, in his essay on the darker Islam within the American Gothic, Sufi motifs in the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, Ahman continued, the Arab's Necronomicon is a urtext, which lies at the heart of Lovecraft's fictitious universe. One passage from the Forbidden Book is uttered in Through the Gates of the Silver Key, which drew Ahman's attention because it echoes Sufism. Sufism is a form of Islamic mysticism that extremists regard as heresy and have targeted believers for terroristic attacks. Sufism is where we get whirling dervish from, and one of the most famous devotees is Rumi, the 13th century Iranian jurist remembered today for his love poems. In Sufism, God has so many veils of lights and darkness to prevent humans from destroying themselves as they see him, which parallels how people in Lovecraft's world go mad when they learn of the truth of cosmic horrors. One of the few to weather these cosmic horrors is Randolph Carter, a rare reoccurring character in Lovecraft's world and the explorer in Through the Gates of the Silver Key, written in collaboration with E. Hoffman Price back in 1932. In the story, Carter's body is destroyed. His self has been annihilated, to be exact, but that is not as bad as it sounds. Carter's quest for the ultimate mystery, quoting Ahman, his desire to draw back the final veil leads him to an anguishing discovery that his Carterness has been nothing more than an illusion, a trick, a dream all along. A passage offers a rather mystical moment. Carter discovers that he is part of the universe and the universe is part of him. There are also some interesting political implications in Lovecraft's repeated political emphasis on the horror of losing one's Bostonian Anglo-Saxon identity. For a writer is convinced of racially structured hierarchies as Lovecraft, the idea of being no longer a defiant being distinguished from one's beings clearly skirts close to unspeakable. Carter, as a result of this process, gains a new body, and he makes a cameo visiting a museum in another story. Sufism contains beliefs in Fana, annihilation of self, and Hayon, illusion. In Sufism, the soul carries with it a secret of its divinity, of its heavenly origins. This secret is cloaked by God under the guise of selfhood. God prevents the real secret from being known, namely that he is the essential self of all things. He conceals it by otherness, which is, in effect, God is the secret of the self, a secret that many unenlightened souls go through their whole lives without discovering, according to Ahman. The Lovecraftian prophet Robert Price echoed a similar thought in his essay on the author's beliefs. Price expressed how another character, Charles Dexter Ward, could not survive his quest into the unknown because it was beyond his capacity to deal with. Randolph Carter survived because he was better prepared, had better friends and family, and cats on his side. While these actions could be taken as a religious experience, that would be a faulty assumption. Lovecraft was a non-believer. What Randolph Carter had sought is his lost boyhood, which had never ceased to mourn. He had sought is his lost boyhood, which he had never ceased to mourn. Basically, Lovecraft saw the Arab sphere as one of the happiest moments of his childhood and wanted to return to the magical world in his works. With the exception of Aladdin and genies, the Arabian Nights doesn't hold the fascination over American children as once before. 9/11 may play a role in that. David Hamblin, a modern South London writer, has been fascinated by Lovecraft's interest in Arabian Nights and started a series of stories centering on an ex-boxer named Harry Stubbs. The first novella, Elder Ice, despite the plot involving the death of a polar explorer, has a mystery which key to the enigma lies in the ancient Arabian book, leading to something more alien, more horrifying than Harry could ever imagine. Steve on Goodreads gave it a meh. I wanted to like this one since I'm a big fan of Lovecraft's Mountains of Madness, but it just never gelled with me. It's too bad because Hamlin can write. The prose is smooth, and the two infrequent horrors are pretty good. The main character has a two-fisted Victor McClanahan charm, but in the end, that's just not enough, since everything just seems so Baker Street in tone, which doesn't actually fit with the post-World War I timing of the story. For now, our night with 1001 Nights will have to end, because the great old ones are curious and want something for you to answer for them, Richard and David. What example of cosmic horrors have existed since Lovecraft has ascended from the earth? Turn it over to Yo now.
Last night's debate is one.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I just said the debate last night was definitely a cosmic horror.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, well, I can't argue with that, but anything else?
If we're talking about stories and authors that have been influenced into the writing of the cosmic horror genre, for saying that Lovecraft was, say, the creator, if you want to go that far, that particular genre, you've got a large number of different authors to choose from. That some are more overt, really writing within, say, the Cthulhu mythos, and then some as far as coming up with their own stories that are just more heavily influenced by them. I'd say as far as Brian Lumley is a good example, because initially he started out writing in the Cthulhu mythos with the Titus Crow stories, but then the Necroscope and the other things that he's done have kind of become doing his own thing. Thomas Ligotti, another good one, as far as gives you that real sense of that kind of that cosmic horror and that existential dread, that you get from Lovecraft stories, from Songs of a Dead Dreamer, and the conspiracy against the human race, some other stories like that. One's a little more topical, I guess, we're talking about adaptations and that type of thing that are current. Lock and Key, that's on Netflix. Stephen King's son, Joe Hill. That series is very, very heavily Lovecraftian influenced, both in tone and even in title, with its initial story arc being Welcome to Lovecraft, and then the villains of the piece being very much, Lovecraftian entities that are trying to influence our worlds through various totems and worshipers, that kind of thing.
You got anything, David? Besides the debate?
Well, I'm looking up the guy's name. I can't think of the name. Okay, Peter Klein's.
Yeah.
It's called 14. And the other one I think is called The Fold, or the line. It's like a
Fold.
The Fold, is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't really see the Lovecraftian influence until you get way into the novels, but they crop up there towards the end, and there's a lot of it's pretty interesting stuff, and it's well written. And I definitely agree with Richard on Ligotti and Lumley. I read some of the Titus Crow books way back. I can barely remember them. It's been a long time. But that's what I
Peter Klein's he's continuing that. I think the 14 and then the Fold were part of a series called Threshold, that are all loosely set in the same quasi-Lovecraftian universe. And there's another book in that series. I'm not sure what the title of it was, but I enjoyed both of those enough that I was like, I wonder what else he's done. And then saw that was part of an ongoing series that I believe are meant to be and set in the same universe, if not necessarily directly interconnected.
There's also John Dies at the End. There's a little series of books there. One of them is This Book is Full of Spiders. John Dies at the End, and I can't remember what the other one is called. But that John Dies at the End was actually made into a movie.
It's a fairly entertaining movie as well, as far as it wasn't as formulaic as you kind of would think going into it.
Yeah, it's on Hoopla, so library users can watch it for free.
I think it until recently it was on Netflix. It may still be on Netflix or Prime.
Yeah. So I see
Definitely.
Princess Cthulhu's making an appearance.
She is.
Yeah. Is
And
that a cat? Is that a
one of
cat you're
the
holding, Princess?
Oh yeah, Lovecraft would approve.
Yes. Yes.
she's vicious.
She's scared. She's a scaredy cat.
Scaredy cat.
Scaredy cat.
She's a scaredy cat. She meows all the time.
She does.
I guess one of the cosmic horror stories I thought about was like actually something that's based on true events. It was the Chernobyl miniseries that was on HBO.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very very much so.
Definitely. The first 4 or 5 episodes were just, they were kind of gut wrenching. And then you had to think, well, this is all true. This really happened. So
Yeah, the way the radiation affected those people had a very cosmic horror effect on them. That
definitely.
had repercussions on. It was a definitely very haunting story to watch, movie to watch. And Neil Gaiman has written a few Lovecraftian stories. And one of them, The Study of Emerald, was kind of like a cross between Sherlock Holmes and Lovecraft. And it was later made into a board game.
I didn't know it was made for the board game. I think we talked about that, though.
There's a lot of them. And then we've met him before, David. Joe Lansdale has done a few Lovecraftian things. He did a sequel to Dunwich Horror, which is done to a graphic novel. And then he did something that was in the Bleeding Shadows collections about a blues musician who struck a serious Falconian tone, they called it. And it's supposed to be very Lovecraftian, they say. I haven't read that one, so I don't know.
It's interesting how much of this, as far as that, if someone's tagged with that label, then I'll be kind of interested in checking out something by them. I started reading a book called The Fisherman by John Langan. I hadn't read any of his stuff before. But as far as that was kind of listed as, or I guess it's put out there as being very Lovecraftian influenced, and that hasn't really shown its hand yet. As far as in the story goes, it's very kind of very much set in just our modern everyday world. But I guess as far as they're just kind of setting the table for whatever those elements are that he's planning on introducing into it.
So is it going to be like how far are you into the story? I mean, is it like a short story? Is it a novel?
No, it's a full novel, but I'm only about 2 chapters into it. So they're just kind of setting the stage for your 2 protagonists who then presumably encounter whatever they're going to encounter. Since even the summaries of it are kind of vague on that matter as far as that's concerned. But I like that going into it as opposed to having too much spelled out in advance.
They say that Stephen King has a few Lovecraftian influences in his stories, particularly like the Dark Tower series. And
True.
Some people say that like It, and also Randall Flagg have very like Lovecraftian, like almost like antagonists. They could be like villains from his universe.
Right. Well, even like the Langoliers, you could even lead that as far as tag that as being Lovecraftian, and as much as say this kind of beyond your comprehension type of cosmic force is what's going to affect the people in the plane unless they're able to get out of the situation that they're in. These things that they're are beyond their comprehension and unable to understand.
Mm-hmm. And he did write one story about Pan, which would have more to do with Lovecraft's influence. Arthur Meacham wrote a novel about Pan, and
Pan, I've read that one.
yeah, that was the short story Lawnmower Man. That has nothing absolutely to do with the movie. So the two have nothing to do with the other, except for the fact I think there was a lawnmower in both of them.
Right.
All that. And the great old ones are in debate. They've overheard discussion between 2 mortals over how to pronounce a particular town in Lovecraft's New England. One citizen of this town is Wilbert Watley, who sought forbidden knowledge from the Necronomicon. This town is spelled Dunwich. How do you pronounce that town?
Dunwich?
Yeah. Do you have any other?
Was there a secondary spelling that I guess I've not heard before? Or not spelling, but pronunciation that I'm not familiar with?
Well, the
Or it was up for debate as far as, if
Well,
it's spelled or pronounced this way or that way.
the English pronounce it Dunwich.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes, and so
There's our competing pronunciation.
yeah. So there are other variations: Dunwich or Dunwich. The movie that came out, they pronounced it as Dunwich. It was done in the 70s, and there are a lot of people who were arguing over this, and they pointed to Greenwich, saying that you pronounce it Greenwich, not Greenwich.
I get that. Okay, I could see that that perspective on it.
But there's also the argument going. There's also Derby. The people. I would say people in Connecticut don't. There's Derby. That's now pronounced as Darby in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people don't know. I did find one person who gave a really interesting argument and says it's Dunwich because this is how I pronounced it when I first read it when I was 11 years old. I'm not so wrong, it's so much I'm nostalgic.
How did they pronounce it in the movie?
In the movie, it was Dunwich.
Okay.
And there's also another town that's pronounced differently by people in Elder Gods. It's populated by fish-like inhabitants and is spelled Insmouth. And this fishing village first appeared in many stories with Lovecraft, such as Shadow over Blank. How do you pronounce it? You got any? How do you think it's pronounced? Huh?
Innsmouth. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I would have assumed as well.
Yeah,
Or I can see how there could be, you would hit different vowels and consonant in it depending on, again, your particular accent or your regionality or that kind of thing. But I didn't know it was that hotly contested as far as how to pronounce it was concerned.
That was not just because it's so slight.
Right.
But while Lovecraft didn't give us any guidance on how to say those towns' names, he did write down and pronounce the name of his most famous cosmic entity, Cthulhu, as in Call of Blank. How do you pronounce that name?
I've always gone with Cthulhu, but I've heard the harder, Cthulhu as being, quote unquote, also acceptable. So there we go.
I just like Cthulhu better.
Mm-hmm.
There's also
Cthulhu doesn't sound mean enough. I'll just be honest with you.
Yeah, there was.
It's not an aggressive enough name.
There's an apocryphal tale that goes that David Wandry, who was a member of Lovecraft's circle, met up with the author and praised his short story called A Blank. When Lovecraft corrected him, Lovecraft enlightened me that on its correct pronunciation, which sounded like a series of witches' whistles. I asked Lovecraft how he possibly could pronounce the name differently from the version of it which I pronounced phonetically. He then said to me, "Look here, I ought to know how to say it, don't you think?" This account ran in the May 1934 edition of Fantasy magazine. Lovecraft denied this happened, and Wandry stated his remarks had been garbled. It did provoke Lovecraft to write about it. He explained in a July 23, 1934 letter to Duane Ramel that the spelling and pronunciations don't match because it is a fumbling human attempting to catch the phonetics of an absolutely non-human word. The name of a hellish entity was invented by beings whose vocal organs were not like man's, hence it has no relation to the human speech equipment. The syllables were determined by physiological equipment wholly unlike ours, hence could never be uttered perfectly by human throats. The actual sound is nearly as any human organs could imitate or any human letters recorded. May be taken as something like Kalalu, with the first syllable pronounced gutturally and very thickly. The U is about like that in full, with the first syllable not unlike Kalu in the sound, hence the H represents guttural thickness. Up to this time in the story, when Professor Angel became interested in the matter, there had never been any attempt to render the name of the hellish Ryland monster in our alphabet. Abu Hazared made an attempt at Arabic letters, which was repeated in Greek by the Byzantine translator. The letters Cthulhu were merely what Professor Angel hastily devised to represent, roughly and imperfectly of course, the dream name orally mouthed to him by the young artist Wilcock. So Kalalu is how we're supposed to pronounce it, but like a speed metal band. something like Kalalu, something like that.
All right.
Other variations of his name go Tulu, as in the mound, Klulu, in the winged death, and Kalalu Tutiel, in the electric executioner. So there you go. You have all these different ways you can say, Kalalu.
It was not meant for our vocal cords to process, and that's why there's such debate over it.
Yeah, we need better organs, for they know where to say it.
I'm pretty set in my ways on that one, just to be honest.
Yeah.
It falls into that whole category of various words from sci-fi and fantasy novels that you never hear spoken aloud, so you have your own, the way that when you read them the first time, the way you would pronounce it, and then you may go decades without hearing another person ever try and say it out loud, and then hear it, and no, that's not the way that I've ever heard it. The way that I pronounce that word.
Rob Bottin, the makeup guy, the horror makeup guy. I mean, when I was a kid, that was Bottin. Rob Bottin. I mean, what kind of name is that? But it was years later that I heard it was Rob Bottin. So yeah, you just have that sort of thing that happens when you're younger, or even older, I guess, if you have nothing to compare it to. Of course, we have the internet now, so we can look those things up if we really want.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I can literally type in, how do you pronounce Cthulhu?
Yeah. Yeah, and of course you can't find a good, consensus in everybody how things are supposed to be. But Lovecraft did put, in the letter stating how he said it should be pronounced, but no one pronounces it that way. Most of the time you see it, spelled just like, pronounced, how it's commonly, you hear it. And
how was it pronounced in the South Park episode?
God, it's been ages since I've seen that episode.
You need to watch those. There's a whole trilogy.
Those are some classics there. And so we got a little bit of time left. What books would you recommend people to read? Who've never read Lovecraft before? What would be the first book you recommend for them to read? Or story, I should say.
I'd probably go with Out the Mountains of Madness, I guess, is like an opener, or something along those, your introductory, if you wanted to go that route, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely up there. I think the top three for me would be The Shadow over Innsmouth, The Dunwich Horror, and At the Mountains of Madness. And At the Mountains of Madness.
Yeah. The popularity of Color Out of Space probably would lead it to, where people are familiar with it, and this as it be an easy sell for somebody who'd never read it before, because, so many movies or this and that's, been made from it. So, as well as the fact, again, that it's kind of easy to wrap your head around versus something that has a lot of elements to it that you might not be familiar with or need to have read a previous story to understand, that kind of thing.
The first Lovecraft story I read was out of the best of the blood clearing tales of Lovecraft, and there was The Rats in the Walls, and it was I guess it was good enough for me, to decide to read on and read the rest of the stories in there. So it did stick with me. Probably my favorite story of his would be Shadow over Innsmouth. And so that was definitely one that sticks with me.
I'm one of the creepiest, I think.
What was that?
Dreams in the Witch House is one of the creepiest, I think.
And I'm trying to remember, there was one story, where the scene always stuck with me, where this one person had their head sticking out of a window, and they were still talking to him and all that. And then one day, in one moment, they realized that his head was no longer there. And I can never remember what story that came from.
You haven't been able to remember what the title was or go back and figure it out?
No, I hadn't. So I've been rereading the stories, but I haven't come across that passage yet.
There's one called The Gable Window. I mean, I don't know that that's it, but it sounds sort of like maybe that could be it.
I'll look at it and see. Check out. And but I think Call of Cthulhu would probably be a good one, since it's kind of like, first kicks off the
yeah, that's true.
Don't want to leave that one out.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would introduce somebody to Mountain of Madness just yet, since it's such a long story, and it seems like you almost have to be familiar with Cthulhu mythos before delve into to really appreciate that one. Because it's like because he goes deep into a lot about the old gods and and their universe and all that.
Well, that's more, I guess, yeah, say 10, 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been his household name as it seems to be today, where even people who haven't read anything have seen it seep into, so many other, whether it be comic books or movies or TV shows or video games or other novels, anything along those lines. Oh, yes, yeah, I'm familiar, with all that, the tentacle guy, that kind as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I guess of all the cartoons out now with Cthulhu, that it's
or even just on internet culture, with on memes and that kind of thing. As far as even people being familiar with it just through that aspect, of popular culture is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, who was it that sent out the Lovecraft sex shop and the booty called Cthulhu?
Yeah,
that was.
I'm surprised I'd never heard, of the Lovecraft erotica store before.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't come up sooner. It seemed like this should have been something been around for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, David, Richard, I see the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussion until they are aligned again next month. 30 Minutes of H.P. Lovecraft is sponsored by Hooked on Phonics, where you need to utter that incantation just right. It was created in association with LovecraftPod.com, the Logan Speculative Fiction Group, with the help of Logan County Public Library, the Lovecraft Eternal Facebook page, the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson and Joshua Dukes for their assistance. Until we meet again, may you avoid the wrath of Princess Cthulhu, or should I say, Cthulhu.